It's about that time.
Visualizing, paddling out and making it real. Dedication, on a level only you can feel. Motivation, it gets stronger every year. Realization, action cures fear. The Surfcast, yeah.
I want to start going all the way back. When did you start surfing?
That's a pretty deep dive back in time, TR. So, yeah, I started when I was 8 years old. My brothers both surfed. My parents moved to Cocoa Beach in the late 50s, and my dad became an engineer out at the Cape. And so I was born in Cocoa, Florida. Yeah, my brothers surfed. My brother was one of the early surfers in Cocoa Beach. He knew Murph the Surf, and he knew Gary Proper, and that's my oldest brother, John. My brother Mark built surfboards and in a garage and stuff, and I kind of was growing up, and a lot of people in and around Cocoa Beach were building surfboards, so in the garages and stuff, and it was, surfing was very prevalent everywhere throughout Cocoa Beach, and of course with Gary Proper's name, Gary lived like 9 houses from my house, and I met Gary when I was like 10 years old. But I started actually when I was 8 years old. And funny enough, Pete Hodgson was one of the guys that gave me like a proper surf lesson. Yeah. And then as far as skateboarding goes, I don't know. I grew up on clay wheels, super surfer, skateboard, goofing around, all around the streets of Cocoa Beach. And there was a pool called Pool and Palms on 8th Street. Sid Abruzzi and the Salick brothers used to live there, and those guys were some of the first guys that I know of, or that I've ever seen like drain a pool and started skateboarding it. I liked the influence. Started really being inspired by watching Greg Weaver skateboard and doing the real kind of styly skateboarding down hills and in streets. I always liked that aspect of it, kind of getting real tight on your skateboarding, doing real tight turns with style. And funny enough, I skateboard regular foot and always have. And in my early years surfing, I surfed both regular foot and goofy foot. And I never really thought, I never thought of it as anything weird. A good 2 or 3 years of my developmental years in surfing, I surfed both ways and didn't even bother with backside. And then some guy, he's like, we kind of was saying, hey, like, why do you surf front side going both ways? And I was kind of like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, and I don't know. I guess it felt more comfortable to go, backside on the right. So I guess I became a goofy foot, surfer. I started making my own boards around 13 years old. I tried some different boards. My parents bought me like a Dick Brewer knee board from Primo Surf Shop because it was the only thing that was like relevant to my size. You really couldn't find any Grom boards, and Dick Kechele owned that Primo Surf Shop, and yeah, it's pretty classic. I swept floors in there when I was like 13 years old for like a short period. Kechele sold me like some different boards. He sold me like a Pat O'Hara board, which is a real respectable local shaper that had been shaping probably longer than anybody in and around Cocoa Beach. And kind of got like a hook winger, like single fin fish kind of board. And again, it was kind of too big, but it's okay. I think I traded that one in. And then Kechele sold me like a 710 or something, like gunny board from Hawaii, which, I had no idea. I kind of remember riding my bike home with this gun, like thinking like, did I just make a mistake? Like what, but at that time, Jerry Lopez and Jackie Dunn, all those guys were the shit. And Lightning Bolt was pretty much on every surfboard. Like all the boards that we made in our garage, we all put lightning bolts on them, and almost all the other shapers in and around Cocoa Beach that were making boards, they were putting lightning bolts on all their boards too. And so it was, it was all because of the movies. We had a movie theater nearby that was a Surfside Playhouse, and all the classic films, Saltwater Wine and Fluid Drive, and all the surf movies. Five Summer Stories came to that movie theater, and it was kind of the go-to movie theater for almost for all of Florida. People would drive from all over to that movie theater. It'd be packed house. You know, I started really getting inspired, like watching Buttons. I'd seen him switching stance, and I was starting to do like things at VLAND and in Larry Bertleman, of course. In that whole era, that was kind of what I started seeing. Like these guys are like skateboarding, they're doing tricks, and I was kind of planted that seed for me that I really want to do something different. Wanted to start taking a different approach, and I brought one of my homemade boards up to the Salick Brothers surf shop, and these guys are legendary pro surfers. They are from Bradenton area on the Gulf Coast. They moved to Cocoa Beach, and so many surfers back in the 70s, they moved to Cocoa Beach. It was kind of the spot, Ron Johns was here, and of course Tabling, and some of those guys were starting to kind of open up the Pandora's box about Sebastian Inlet. Surfers were coming down from Virginia and all over the East Coast, and of course Larry Pope was the key photographer that kind of really kind of honed in on all those guys' skills, tabling and proper, and really long list of names: Fletcher Sharp, Claudia Cochin, Dickie Munson, Crawford, of course. So it was kind of like, I don't know, I think that maybe inspired a lot of people to maybe like, yeah, Cocoa Beach area is the shit, Yeah, so I brought that, one of my used boards up to the Salick Brothers surf shop, and I know the board was horrendous, but for me, it was like, it was the right size, and it was my own. It was something I made. I was proud of it. But those guys kind of like, in a really nice way, they kind of told me that, hey, I'd like to, get you on our Carson Salick surfboards. And, going back to Rich and Phil Salick, these guys they're twin brothers. And they actually competed in Oceanside. Rich Salick actually beat Drew Harrison in the Oceanside World Contest, and it was really controversial. There's this picture of Rich Salick and Drew Harrison. They're both poking each other in the chest. I think Drew was really hurt because Rich had beat him. Rich Salick looks like a linebacker for like the 49ers or something. Very stout, very built, strong guy, and Rich is the most he's the coolest guy you could ever meet, Tony, and nicest guy ever. Like it would really take him a lot to ever get him to poke you in the chest with his finger, really heavy. That was way before my time. But so as I started kind of fitting the pieces together, I realized these guys are like surf stars here in my backyard, and the Salick brothers, they had a really solid team, and they had Bob Carson, who's a Cocoa Beach graduate, and his brother David Carson, who I'm sure you've heard of David Carson. He's a really affluent artist and graphic designer. So those guys all had that surfing background too, and so I don't know, Cocoa Beach was a culmination hotspot of top surfers, and Greg Lohr lived in Cocoa Beach and went to Cocoa Beach High, and Jim Cartland, and Crawford was from up around Titusville area, and he moved down this way too, I think. And the Wave Rider magazine kind of popped up kind of a few blocks away from my house. John and Gunnar Griffin, pretty neat knowing that we had a surf mag right in our backyard. And the Salick brothers were huge for me. They gave me that hopes that I could make a go at surfing. They brought me on board their team, and they brought me down to Sebastian for my very first time. And coincidentally, I think David Nueva was surfing my first time. I got to Sebastian, he was surfing the third peak lefts, and it was kind of blew me away. And started kind of, you're a young kid, you're very impressionable. Really really green and knowing like what's going on in the real surf world at that time. But kind of caught wind, like guys like Mike Purpose were coming to town. Some of the Californians were coming right around that time, like Surf Expo popped up right in Cocoa Beach, the very first Surf Expo. And that was Ross Houston started that show. He was a distributor for surfboard goods from Miami, and he would drive all the way up from Miami and distribute resin and fiberglass and all the different materials that, you know, go into surfboards. And he kind of started thinking like, you know, he could see the growth potential in the industry just through his distribution. And so he started Surf Expo at the Atlantis Beach Lodge in Cocoa Beach. I think it was 75, 76. Yeah, skateboarded down there, and like Herbie Fletcher and all these guys were there exhibiting. It was mostly all surfboards and skateboards. And Sid Abruzzi was there, and all around the show and cruising around. It was like basically like a hotel, and they opened up all the rooms, and then they had a portion of the hotel. It was kind of a fairly large area where the Surfer Magazine was there, and a bunch of the surfboard guys were displaying boards and stuff too. So that was left a real big impression on me that, wow, Cocoa Beach is pretty cool, you know, and all these guys coming here, and so the Salick brothers, yeah, they took me under their wing and really encouraged me and got me surfing in some of the contests, asked me to, you know, start surfing some of the Canaveral Pier events, and I started doing some of the boys events and getting a few results here and there, and you know, I got a picture in the magazine, and it kind of really started getting me inspired. But I can't thank Rich Salick and his brother Phil enough. Rich had passed away. These guys started the National Kidney Foundation annual surf event, which had become the largest charitable surf event in the world. The reason why, because Rich lost his kidney, and his brother Phil gave him a kidney and saved his life, basically. Then the Salick brothers started one of the first team events in Cocoa Beach, and the very first one, that was in 1977, I believe, and it had pumping surf, and Greg Lower was there, and the Ocean Avenue team guys were there. It was a really big thing, you know. It was right about that time, kind of piecing it together here, even just talking about it, is right about that time is when, you know, I got invited to be a part of the Ocean Avenue team. That was Bruce Walker and Lewis Graves. Lewis was Lewis Graves is Dylan Graves' father, which you probably met maybe back in the day around Puerto Rico, possibly. Lewis moved to Puerto Rico. So yeah, Lewis had also passed away. So rest in peace, Lewis. You know, we all love you. Yeah, that Ocean Avenue team was this huge opportunity for me. I recognized because it was all these surfer skaters. They surfed Sebastian Inlet. Bruce had Rodney Mullen on the Walker skate team. There was Jim McCall, who was at that time, he was pretty much a national freestyle skateboarding champion. I was kind of like, you know, really, really picking up on the energy that these guys were really next level with their team. And Lewis Graves, actually, like, some people credit him as being the first guy that started a photo incentive contract for surfers and contest incentives as well. So it was kind of like all of the above. It was kind of like, wow, this is a team. And you know, there was a lot of other teams. Natural Art was a very prominent team, of course, and they had incredible surfers too. But Ocean Avenue had the surf skate team, you know, and Bruce Walker led the skate team, and Lewis Graves led the surf team. The factory was right behind the surf shop on Ocean Avenue in Melbourne Beach, just a block away from where Lost has a surf shop now called Catalyst. That was definitely the zone. You know, it's only like want to say 14 miles from Sebastian Inlet. And so for me, being from Cocoa Beach, which was good 50-minute drive to get to Sebastian, now, by hooking up with Ocean Avenue, and which actually Bruce ended up giving me a job too in the distribution area, packing skateboards for him and stuff. Suddenly I was like, only 14, miles from Sebastian. All I had to do is just get to Ocean Avenue, and then, I could get to Sebastian Inlet easily because those guys were going to Sebastian virtually every day, And so Greg Lower was their top shaper, and pretty inspiring article if you wanted to ever look it up. I think it was like 1978 article that Bruce Veluzzi, who was like a top surfing champion from the 60s, and he was a really great journalist and writer. He wrote an article on the Ocean Avenue team called "The Kids Are All Right," and it was about the surf skate thing that they had going, and just the energy around the Ocean Avenue team, and Klugel, Jackie Grayson, Lewis, Tim Briers, Greg Mungle. It just had it going on, TR. They really did. Skateboarding, as you know, in that, 77, 78, skate parks started popping up everywhere, all around Florida. Bruce Walker, he's always been this really highly intelligent human, which is just really great with, being very descriptive. And, he would kind of be informing me of like all the different skate tricks that were coming together. The skateboarders were every day, like new tricks were being invented. And I was just super inspired by that. And it was just like in Sebastian Inlet, coincidentally, it reminded me of some of the early skate parks where they'd have maybe like a little snake run, and then like, some little hips, at the skate park. There'd be like this little roll in, roll out hip, where you could kind of pop in air or go over and do like a slide your wheels on, and do that Larry Bertelman sort of grind, but by that time, Kryptonics were coming into play, and, skateboards and the skate trucks, and, everything was developing so fast. Right. And Bruce, working with him in distribution, it was almost seemed like, every couple of weeks or a month, there'd be like these new products that'd come in, and you'd be like, the skate trucks were getting better, the wheels were getting better, the bearings were getting better. To try to keep up with it was probably a nightmare. But Bruce definitely kept up with all of that, and because he had just this top-notch team, too. They were traveling, nationally to various events and all around Florida, the skate guys. I want to say Mike McGill actually skated for Bruce for a short period. Mark Lake was this really early old school skater that a lot of people kind of credit for being one of the first guys doing the hand plants, the upside down hand plant. A lot of people in and around Cocoa Beach, they were building half pipes in the woods or out on the islands. It's perfect because Florida, there's so many days the waves are small. So what are you going to do? We'd go wake surfing or we'd go skateboarding, and so I spent a lot of time skateboarding. And I want to say I broke my leg when I was 14. It was funny. Actually, on one of Sid Abruzzi's skate ramps back in the woods near the dentist office in Cocoa Beach. And it's funny, like I was trying to perfect just doing tail taps on the coping, and we started putting these like rubber sort of tags on the bottom of the kicktail to kind of stop us right at the very top of the coping, and kind of do a tail tap where your trucks and wheels are, off the ramp and you're kind of vertical. That little window, as you know, skateboarding was taking off, and and so as same with you. It all connected at that time. It all made sense to me to kind of start fooling around and experimenting out in the water and figuring out what I could do, translating certain skate tricks to surfing. And at that very time, it was around 77, 76. Greg Lower was showing up in the magazines going like 12 o'clock vertical with his board, like on his single fins. I was riding single fins when I first joined Ocean Avenue. You're only going to do so much, on a single fin. It's just, you could take these top surfers today and you put them on a single fin and they're going to rip, but it's not going to be nothing like what they're doing on their tri-fins or their quads, TR. But just to kind of explain to the people listening, the single fins they were slower. The fins were kind of clunky. Bertleman and Buttons, I think they took it kind of about as far as you could go with kind of moving the fin up in the box. And it seemed ironic that maybe by having the fin kind of wiggle in the box, it maybe made the board, actually ride better and maybe less sticky, and kind of to wrap their turns around and so forth. And yeah, so all that stuff was just very deep in my mind, and I was practicing skateboarding, surfing, and all of that as much as I possibly could. So yeah, Jeff Klugel, was definitely, I think him and Mungle were the best surf skate sort of guys. Greg Lower skated too. Klugel was probably the best surf skate guy at that time. He got a pretty good feature in Sports Illustrated magazine. It's pretty cool. Skating at the Indian Harbor Beach skate park. It's a pretty cool skate park they built. And Mark Lake built this extension, and it went like 3 feet of vertical, and it was a nightmare, bro. A lot of guys getting hurt on that. But anyhow, yeah, it's just a lot of guys that were, kind of all thinking the same thing, is just kind of inspired, skateboarding and wanted to see where it was going to go, and it's such an exciting time, TR. The music at the time, Devo and all the different skate music that was, very prevalent that the skateboarders liked. For me, I was just like, wow, this is it. This is where surfing's going, It's just a matter of time before it all starts, culminating into, way more radical things happening on surfboards. So it wasn't until this shaper, Daryl Bolger, he came to the Ocean Avenue factory. He was a shaper for Mark Richards, and he shaped he shaped some of Mark Richards, ghost shaping for Mark on the twin fins when they first came out. And so Klugel got the first one, and everybody was just like watching Klugel surfing going like next level, like the very first session. And it was just like, it was on, TR is like, it's going so much faster. And he was already starting to do way more radical things, kind of starting to grind on the lip. And I got a twin fin shortly after that. It was a Jeff Klugel model, double winger, round pin, twin fin. And so Greg Lower, of course, he was going to put his spin on it. And Daryl Bolger was doing the hook winger swallowtails, MR style. And very, very progressive. Like we had never seen nothing like it, and I don't think many people in America had access to that type of board yet, MR, of course, he was starting to show up, surfing him in Hawaii, but people weren't seeing it nationally until, the photos were showing up, the movies were showing up. And I want to say that was in around 78. People were really starting to kind of, whoa, take notice, like, whoa, twin fins off the wall. Yeah, super inspiring. And he was doing things that the single fin guys weren't. And not to take away from the single fin guys, Sean Thompson, those deep carves that he was doing, Peter Townend with the laybacks, like I was all about like doing the laybacks. Like that was about as radical as I could get on the single fins. I loved it, but And then shortly after that, I wanted to do that Greg Lower vertical. A lot of the other younger Ocean Avenue surfers, there was Greg Taylor and Tony Graham, they were two guys from Merritt Island. And they were like just like a year older than me, but their surfing was really shining, and they were doing Greg Lower type, 12 o'clock vertical, just like I was, doing skateboarding and some of the other skateboarders were doing. And I picked up on after I injured myself, TR, I was like, skateboarding is unreal, but I want to surf. I'd mentioned Klugel was starting to grind on the lip. Pat Mulhern, shortly after, he got a twin fin pintail. He was starting to go places on the waves too at First Peak that we hadn't seen yet. Klugel started getting shots. He went out to Trestles. Mungle was going out to California quite a bit at that same time too. He was starting to get quite a bit of recognition in and around Trestles, and he was hooking up with Herbie Fletcher and starting to do some real radical stuff too. And again, it's so hard not to jump back and forth, but the Florida Pro became like a really big event here at Sebastian Inlet. The Griffin brothers, the guys from Wave Rider magazine, started Florida Pro, and like Crawford won it one year, Mungle won it one year, PT, Rabbit, Ian, Jim Banks, Reno Abelero, Larry Bertelman, Dane, I want to say Dane came out one time for it. Yeah, that was a big deal. It was a really big deal. And like that really solidified to me at that time, those first Florida Pros, I didn't even really know about them taking place at Sebastian. That was when I was on the Salick team. All of a sudden those guys started showing these 8mm movies in their parking lot at their surf shop, having like surf parties and showing that like all the Californians and Hawaiians ripping at Sebastian Inlet. And I was just like, whoa, man, this is incredible that these guys are coming to Florida. Like, why are they coming to Florida? I was like kind of confused, and but it was like, it was really cool to me. It really kind of like meant something to me. Like, if these guys are coming here, it must be something going on here that's pretty cool. And it was all Sebastian Inlet, really. I think they had all heard about Sebastian Inlet. They knew it was a pretty good wave, and they had seen Larry Pope's photos in the magazines. Surfer and Surfing used to feature Sebastian Inlet a lot, only because Larry Pope was able to work around the lighting and use the jetty, get out on the jetty instead of shooting straight into the sun in the morning time. Get out on the jetty and work a different angle where the lighting was a little better. Pope figured out a way to work around that, and coincidentally is like, Greg Lower and Crawford were kind of like his subjects on those left-handers at Sebastian, and they were pretty special back then. The waves were pretty damn good. Tabling kept Sebastian Inlet under wraps for, I don't know, 3 years or so. Like, wasn't even telling like his Cocoa Beach friends about it. They built the jetty, they extended the jetty, the wedge was working, and he would only invite just a few friends, like, to come down and surf with them. Pretty special, TR. I had heard stories where he was actually finding Spanish coins, like just coming out of the water at Sebastian. He'd find silver Spanish pieces of 8 just in the shore break and stuff from, the 1700s. Sebastian was a pretty special place, this man-made wave that, somehow became like, the kind of the hot spot, the focal point for East Coast surfing, the Salick brothers, turned me on to that. And it was just like I was scrounging up money any way I could to try to find some of the old timer guys around Cocoa Beach to give them some beer money to give me a ride to the inlet. Sometimes they'd drop me off, and I'd call and get my mom to come pick me up. And so, yeah, I definitely recognized that Sebastian was so much better than any of the other surf spots, So, yeah, TR is, just hopping in the van, working at Ocean Avenue. We'd load up the van, and it would be Jeff, Bruce Walker, Glenn Klugel, I think Jim McCall surfed a little bit, Jackie Grayson, and hop in the van. We'd ride to the inlet, and Bruce would start describing different skate tricks that he'd recently seen at some of the skate competitions. And he started talking about, Jim McCall was doing some of the kind of on urban terrain. He was doing these little pop airs, Bruce started talking about Alan Galfan, who was down at Skate USA skate park in Fort Lauderdale, and he was talking about the ollies. And right away, like a lot of his friends were calling them ollies because they're named after Alan Galfand. And he was getting that transition. And TR, there's old photos that we've seen, guys on single fins. There's some of myself where it's like, we're like this, the lip is like this, we're doing an air, right? But it's like, it's that transition coming down. That's the hard part. And that's what Alan Galfan had down, and that was like, that's what really clicked for me at Sebastian Inlet when Bruce was describing like how Alan would hit this hip and then kind of tail high, transfer the board to point back down and ride back down the transition smoothly and make it look good, with style. And so for me, I was just like right away, I was like, that same day I was trying those at Sebastian. I had a twin fin, I was able to get this speed, and right away I was doing them. And Bruce kept encouraging me to keep doing them. I was 16 at the time. I had this one particular board. I had Mike Nimnick airbrush a sperm, like a Rick Griffin kind of thing. But I just, in my mind, I knew like I was going to do something really special, like that's new, like airbrush that would kind of inspire me. I was trying to do them on single fins and stuff, but it wasn't until I got the twin fin that, the Jeff Klugel series twin fin, that it was like started clicking for me, So all of that is a culmination of like really what inspired me. And Sebastian Inlet is just kind of a no-brainer. The way that wedge is, so you'd be riding on the left and all of a sudden the wedge would just be coming at you, kind of at a 45-degree angle. All you had to do is just come off the bottom, hit that thing, and, and just get the tail, transfer, and you could ride out pretty smooth off. Right away, I started doing those airs, and I started getting some contest results. I was 16. I got third in a Canaveral Pier event. Rabbit Bartholomew came. Pat Mulhern was pretty much like really starting to become like the established pro in and around our area in Brevard. He moved here from California with his dad. His dad was a real prominent board builder. And they started MTB surfboards, and it was Mulhern, Takayama, and Blair's, I believe. That was where the MTB came from. Pat was surfing really incredible, and I was starting to compete against him in the ESA. In my early amateur days, I beat him a couple times, like much to my surprise. I was like, wow, man, I can't believe I actually beat Pat Mulhern, Shortly after that, I see him on Wide World of Sports at Sunset Beach with Beaver Massenfeller, and I think it was him and Beaver won, and PT, and I can't remember, it might have been PT and Ian, or PT and somebody got second in that event. I don't know if you recall that, but it was really progressive, man, seeing somebody doing laybacks at Sunset, and like really, really inspired me, TR. I was like, oh my gosh, that's Pat Mulhern. Like, he's on TV.
Meanwhile, on the shore, the members of the USA East and British Commonwealth teams are getting ready for the next semifinal heat. Pat Mulhern, what are you going to do this time against this team?
Well, we're going to try and use the same tactics as Mark just did. Sneaking around, snaking the waves. I don't know, though. Mark is very well known, and it's going to be a tough heat for us. I know that for sure.
And Mark Richards, what's your reaction to that?
Well, these guys are really in trouble. We've got a new strategy down, and they're still working on the old one, so they've got no chance at all.
Okay.
It's Pat Mulhern taking off. S turning down the face. He's just picking up some terrific waves. A little stall trying to get back into the tube. Just really radical manoeuvring. Pat Mulhern is pulling through the USA East team here, I tell you.
For the USA, the East Coast team, Steve Maskeller and Pat Mulhern.
And we have an upset in the semifinals as the U.S. East team has defeated. Come on, don't go away, guys, because I want to ask you something first. Mark Richards, this has got to be a big shock for you, huh?
Oh, definitely. We were going to beat them, but we didn't.
No, you're going to get that impression, huh? Surprise.
Well, they just got better waves, you know. They were on to that one and we weren't.
Right.
So,
Steve Maskeller, did you ever think that you would get in the finals, really, when you started today's play?
Well, you know, I've had a bit of bad luck before in competition, and I don't ever really count on it, but I give it my best, and, well, it worked out today, and here we are.
Sunset Beach in Hawaii, Dick Stockton and Ian Cairns, and the finals of World Team Surfing. As you look at Pat Mulhern and Steve Maskeller of the United States East team, they have been surprises so far, but they'll have their hands full against the Aussie team, Peter Townend, closest to you, and Shane Horan. This is the finals of World Team Surfing, the Aussies against the USA East team primarily. They've been doing their surfing in Florida, and the teams are going out to the water now. We have outstanding surf. We started with 8, we're down to 2, ready for the finals, and now we're underway with the action.
Outside, Peter Townend. Giant wave, just so calm and collected. He's really experienced.
He's had some great rides in this championship.
He knows Sunset Beach. He's been competing here for 7 years. He's just the old pro. He's great.
Does the USA East team have a chance against the Aussies? I know they're underdogs.
Yeah, they're looking terrific. Oh, well, how can they fail? Look at this wave Pat Mulhern's into. It's just terrific. Carving off the bottom. It's another tube ride. Yeah, they just cannot fail. Pat Mulhern's got all the luck running with him. They're just looking terrific.
We could have a surprise here. The Aussies beat Japan in a close battle, then beat South Africa. USA East is giving them a fight.
Here's Maskeller again. It's not a fight. It looks like a trouncing. How can I say that? My mates, the Aussies, are going down. Maskeller's just ripping as well. You know, they're just doing chop there. He's handling that. You know, normally he would have wiped out. He's pumped. Handles that white water falling on top of him. They're really going for it, I'm telling you. Here's Shane of the Australians. You know, he's now, look at that, you know, out the back, wipe out. It looks like the East Coast, what can I say, another tube ride, you know, they've got control of the situation. Off the lip, you know, for a 17 or 18-year-old kid to handle that power at Sunset Beach is just remarkable.
A couple of kids from Florida come out way west to Hawaii and are showing up the world.
PT's just, you know, he's trying to come back. The waves just aren't cooperating. This is the sort of thing that happens, you know.
And there's the horn, and that finishes the finals. And from what we saw, we'll have to wait for the official judging. USA East look good, but we'll wait and see.
In the event, the new World Team Champions, USA East Coast.
They've done it. The United States East has defeated the heavily favored Aussies to do it, and the big reason is this great tube ride by Pat Mulhern. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this exciting surf action. I'm amazed how they do it.
It really inspired me to, like, that's what I want to do. Like, it was really solidified, like, this is what I want to do, you know, TR. Yeah, thanks to Pat. And Pat was he was an incredible surfer. He could do the backside layback in the barrel thing, sort of thing that, you know, you didn't see a whole lot of people do back in those days, and that really kind of inspired me to do that sort of maneuver. So yeah, Pat started winning some of the pro events locally, and he was winning pretty solid prize money around 79, 80. I found myself in a Canaveral Pier event, and there was like PT was in it, and Rabbit was in it, and Mulhern, and the waves were pretty small, but I came up against Rabbit in the semifinal, and I was blown away that I made it that far, and that I was even like getting to surf against one of my idols, you know, that I idolize. Yeah. And, yeah, it was just like Rabbit kind of chatted it up with me a little bit, and I was almost forgot what I was doing, you know, and it's pretty hilarious, but he beat me, and he went on to the finals, and Pat beat Rabbit in the finals. But it was $1,000. I was 16. I was looking at a check. I could take it or not, you know. And there's no question I wanted to take it. And back then, it was like if you accepted prize money, it was kind of like a rule within the ESA and the WSA. If you accepted prize money, from a surf event, you're a pro surfer. My parents were really pretty unsure about about surfing and really where it might go for me. But when I came home with $1,000 check, they were pretty stoked. After I'd won some money and decided to go pro, Bruce offered me and Lewis offered me my own model. I was fully starting to take to the air, and I had asked Greg Lohr to make me a skateboard tail. And I didn't really know that it was referred to as a squash tail, kind of like what Rabbit was riding the single fin squash tails. I was like, what Rabbit has, but I want like a twin fin. And then, I wanted the hook wingers like what MR had. And so that's what Greg made me. And he started making them with concave decks, because right around that same time, the skaters were starting to put concave decks on their skateboards, and it all kind of made sense to help you kind of stay on your board, stay glued to the board better, stay above the board as you transitioned in the air to keep it underneath your center, and so that became my model. It was like a Keck Air, Matt Kechele series. So I kind of learned that whole aspect on that's the way you sell surfboards, you bring your team on the road, you bring, truckload of boards, you go to all the local surf spots, you surf with them, you show a movie, hang out together, talk surf story, and that's, and I imagine that same sort of thing was happening in Santa Cruz, I guarantee it, and in Southern California. And I think that was, to me, it was like, for me, that was the momentum generation. It was like, we were all inspired by Sean Thompson, MR, and those guys were the momentum guys that like had this vision, of, through their surfing on the North Shore, like, like this is what pro surfing's gonna kind of look like, Dick Catree, the Griffin brothers, the guys from Wave Rider magazine, and the guys that started the Florida Pro. Catree was involved with the Florida Pro as well. They started having, pro surf events like up and down the East Coast. And there was a period we had $145,000 circuit. It was called the APS, American Professional Surfers. That's, I think, where PT or one of those guys kind of switch went off and said, well, points, surfing tour for points, and those guys had it going, Pete Dooley came in shortly after, like in the early 80s, with Professional American Surfers. I think it was called PAS, and him and Carol Holland, Todd Holland's mother, were running those. And so there was kind of like a contest wars going on, it was like two circuits. And so when I said $145,000 circuit, that was both those circuits together. But it was like there was events in Myrtle Beach, there was events in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. There was the Grogs Pro that they had events at Daytona Beach. There was events at New Smyrna Beach. It was pretty rad. Pat Mullen was pretty much dominating, like many of them. A lot of small waves, really small waves, TR. I recognize there's a lot of prize money, and all these events have usually almost small waves. And I want to just work on my small wave surfing as much as I possibly can. I purposefully wanted to try to become like the best small wave surfer in the world and get really good at contest surfing. And so I started getting pretty good and winning more and more prize money. And Pat and I were dueling in some various finals. And then the Stubbies event came to town, and that was Bill Bowman from Queensland. He was one of the promoters for the Stubbies brand. It was board shorts out of Australia, and they were competing against the Quicksilvers and OP at the time. So, yeah, Stubbies brought the event to Trestles, and then they brought it to Sebastian Inlet, the very first one in 1981. All the best surfers from up and down the East Coast Yeah, I was 18 years old. I was going to cut my teeth against all the best guys, at my home break. Jeff Crawford, former pipeline master, was in it. And, Scotty Durr from New Jersey, David Knuckles, Wes Lane. Yeah, the winner would get a ticket to Australia, and it was like $3,000. And it was a 6-day event. It was in September, and we got lucky with like this cold front, like combined with a hurricane, and we had like pumping surf throughout the whole thing. And so the event was getting ready to start, TR, right? And it was pretty heavy. Leon Johnson was the judge at the Stubbies, and he pulled like a sidebar sort of conference together with the judges, and it kind of blew my mind. Like there were some surfers kind of on the outskirts of this little powwow meeting the judges were having, and Leon stuck his neck out. He was saying that aerials are going to be the future of surfing. And, and he's saying, just like the skateboarders, he goes, it's here, it's now, it's happening, and we need to start scoring them, and I was kind of like, in respect to all my peers and all the other surfers that I really looked up to, I was kind of like shy and kind of like, whoa, like kind of blown away. Like I couldn't even believe what I was hearing, but, and I kind of like walked away, like almost like kind of blown away, like, and I don't really know what was discussed, like beyond that, when he first brought that up. I think there was a lot of resistance because there was a lot of other judges that didn't want to see surfing go that way, and they were more purists, and and then of course, like Jeff Crawford's in this event. He's a former pipeline master. There's all these really reputable pros. They're not really about airs, but so it was kind of like, in hearing that, I never really got daylight on exactly what came out of that meeting. You know what I mean, TR? But I was really impressed that somebody, that Jeremy Johnson's father had that insight and really stuck his neck out, like at a big event like that. Like they could have just said, you're fired, you're out of here, Like it put a really lot of pressure on me because it was like the waves were pumping, and and it was like, well, and I didn't get clarity to like, are they going to be scoring airs or not? To do airs proper, you need like the good winds, and so like some of the early rounds were offshore winds, barreling waves, really, really good, and I made it through all those rounds, found myself in the finals, against Pat Mulhern, and the winds, the swell was dying down a little bit. It kind of got a little bit junkier. There was like thousands of people on the beach, and it was just like crazy pressure. Like, but in my mind, I was like, I'm kind of known, like already kind of come down this path. I'm kind of known to be like an air guy, and I was doing all kinds of other surfing. I was really into doing like under the lip snaps and other things like that, but I wasn't as well-rounded as some of my other competitors, for sure. And even Pat Mulhern had more travel experience than I did. Nonetheless, it was like, I'm going to do some airs in this final. And I sent you the shots where I do 2 little airs on one wave. That was in the final. It's trippy, man. My girlfriend at the time, they had like an intermission, I think, in between maybe one of those heats, and they had a bikini contest, right? TR, like the Florida contest, they were always kind of famous. Katri and those guys, they were all about having these bikini contests. And my girlfriend, entered the bikini contest, and it really freaking pissed me off. TR, like, dude, smoke coming out my ears, And what's pretty weird about it is my girlfriend was a twin. Pat Mulhern's girlfriend was the other twin. And so we were dating twins, right? I was definitely like really PO'd, like she entered the bikini contest. So it kind of like it really fueled this sort of anger that I took out in the water. I think it actually helped me win the event. I was really pissed off at the time, and even I came out of the water. You can see in that clip, my girlfriend's right next to me, and I'm wrapping up my leash, and I'm kind of like pissed. I'm thinking that maybe I lost. I don't know. She's thinking that I won, and I was like, almost didn't even want to talk to her. So yeah, we got up on the podium, and they announced that I won. It was pretty special. Kechele was there. He popped the champagne, and it was pretty big deal at the time, TR. In hindsight, like the whole aerial thing and contests and, and taking that on the road and doing it, like in my mind, I was like, the conditions have to be right to do airs, and it's not like, yeah, paddle out back then and do airs, perform like I'm a circus monkey or something, and I'm like, it's not that way, and it's like, and so I was already kind of like formulating in my mind, like, this is like a stepping stone to greater things for me. I get to go to Australia now. I'm going to really start working on my surfing to like really find another gear and work on my rail surfing and work on my tube riding and all that. And, I'd been to Hawaii. My parents bought me a ticket to Hawaii when I graduated from high school. So I went to Hawaii with Greg Lower and Bob Roman, and in 1980, the winter of 80, we went in October, and pretty special. I got to surf pipeline with like 12 guys out, and Jerry Lopez was out, and a number of some underground, pipeline riders. I was all formulating, like, where am I going here? I kind of already knew going to Burley Heads. I wasn't going to be doing airs and totally like change surfing, just me, myself. I competed in the Bells event, and I surfed through the trials. And then I got to surf in the Stubbies at Burley Heads. I didn't perform great. I wasn't really happy with my boards, and I was all about glass-ons before Australia, but Greg Lower thought maybe it'd be a good idea that I put the freestyle removable fins in my boards. They weren't great fins. They were okay, but you weren't getting the lean, like the glass-on twin fins and the cant, like you weren't getting it as precise and stuff as those glass-on fins back in the day. We had really, really top-notch glass-on fins. Mongol was making us fins, and this guy Mike Notary used to make us these white pine glass-on fins that were just like ultra light, and they're just ultra like foiled out to perfection, like nice and thin fins to like what we have today. Really way ahead of their time. Really hard to put on the boards. Glass them on and put a rope bead going around the top of the fin, when you glass it on. So it had like a protective edge on the top of the wood. And they were beautiful fins. But anyhow, so I made the mistake of bringing, boards that I wasn't familiar with. And they were kind of rushed out. It sounds like excuses, whatever. But bottom line is I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for the world tour. I wasn't ready for, surfing those kind of waves in Australia, and I hadn't had much experience on point breaks. But I was determined to figure it out, And so, yeah, I came back from Australia, and shortly after, the Ocean Avenue factory burned down. The factory right behind the surf shop, just major fire. Everything in the factory burned up. And I was in tears, I thought like it's all over, like, and this ride that I had up until that point, I had my own model. I was doing these coast runs up the coast, surfing different breaks up and down the coast. I was getting to go to all the surf contests through just hopping in the van with the Ocean Avenue team. We were going to all these pro events and just all that high energy. I was devastated, my shaper, Bruce, reassured us that, he's going to regroup. He's going to, he's waiting for the insurance to see how it lines up, to see if he's going to get reimbursed, and start up the factory again. And there was a lot of things going on at the time that I think he and Lewis were dealing with personally, which I probably didn't really, quite understand. I was devastated. I literally cried, and so it was about a year. He'd asked me to kind of hang in there and wait it out as long as I could. And it was taking, quite some time. Ed Leisure from Quiet Flight, he was just really getting the Quiet Flight label really going in Cocoa Beach. He had Richard Munson shaping for him, who's a top East Coast pro and a shaper. So Ed offered me a contract. He goes, hey, we'd like you to come to Quiet Flight. If you want to shape your own models through the Quiet Flight label, we're going to offer you your own shaping bay. And, we'd like you to go ahead and draft up your own contract and present it. And so, I was torn, but I let Bruce know. Yeah, so I'm just really thankful, TR, that I was able to hook up with, the Ocean Avenue guys at that point in time, and really had such a huge effect. I drafted up my own contract and had quite a bit of experience already through I surfed for O'Neill, and O'Neill used to send us some pretty top-notch sort of contracts that were pretty self-explanatory as to like what they were all about and the working, the working parts of the contract that made sense to me. I kind of took bits and pieces and put it together and made my own Quiet Flight contract, and included shaping and getting paid a royalty for my own boards, and my, the boards that I shaped, and then the boards that I didn't shape, so that while I was on the road, if, Richard shaped them, then I would get a royalty for them. It was really a sweet deal. And so right around that same time, Kelly Slater and his brother, their surfing was starting to take off, and they were surfing at the end of my street in Cocoa Beach, and people were starting to take notice. And Kelly was starting to win in some of the little amateur mini hoon events, and Sean was getting some good results in some of the ESA events as well. And Kelly was riding some Dick Catree boards at that time, and they were really, really fat and round. And I kind of recognized, and no disrespect to Catree, and again, TR, not that many guys like shaped Grom boards, like little kids. Like Kelly weighed like 48 pounds or something like that, and he was like 4'4", very small. I approached him and I said, hey, I'd really like to make your boards, Kelly and Sean. I want you to come down to Quiet Flight. And my shaping was starting to come together. I still had a long way to go, but it was coming together enough that I knew what I was doing to be able to make them a board better than what they were riding. I encouraged them to come out to the shaping bay because I really needed them to be there to really size up the boards and get them to stand next to them and get the everything proportionately right. Was the first kind of thing that I was really going after. But yeah, it was a funky time for surfboard shaping my production shaping when I first started getting into that, TR, and you probably would recognize as well, like that, like 83, the boards were like, people were influenced by Shane Horan. They wanted that laser zap. Shane was like the young pro, that the young Aussie that was, a lot of people were really digging on, and they were digging on the surfing that he was doing. He was coming off the bottom, getting real vertical on those boards at surfing in Hawaii, and he was very inspirational to a lot of East Coast surfers. At the same time, like the Schroff boards were actually pretty popular as well. They were kind of showing up on our coast, and they were really wide tails too, like really wide, and I wasn't about them, but that's kind of what everybody wanted. That, the consumers out there, they wanted something like in between what Shane was riding and what Schroff was making, and so that's kind of like, it was an odd place for me to start out as a shaper, and And I think a lot of people were really confused. And but it is what it is. It was a part of a learning curve that, you know, got us to where we are today. I mean, yeah, those wide tails, they worked in little 1-foot waves, you know, and you could get lots of speed and do some pretty cool maneuvers, but they weren't good boards for carving on. Shane had the body physique, you know, he had real stout, low center of gravity, real thick legs, big thighs. He could kind of surf those boards. No disrespect towards anybody. I just don't really think it was a great direction. You know, I think if we were to have been able to stick to what MR was writing, and coincidentally, I think MR proved that, you know, all through the early 80s that his boards were better, you know, and because he was the one that was winning, and he strung together 4 world titles, you know. Simon's thrusters came out in 81, 82, they were showing up. And when I was in Australia in 82, I got Daryl Bolger's boss, Darby, to shape me a thruster when I was with Chris Barella, and we went and got one made, and it was our first thrusters. We were really excited. I brought that back to the East Coast, and they looked really legit, you know, but there's just something about them. Like the fins were probably a little bit too thick. Maybe the back fin was probably a little bit too far, you know, close to the tail block. Hard to get much speed, hard to get much energy out of that type of board on our East Coast kind of surf, you know. So I ditched it. I wish I'd kept the board. It was a beautiful board, you know, but just as far as the way it rode, it just wasn't the magic for me, you know. And it seemed like for Barella as well. I don't know what Barella ended up doing with his, but so I don't know. Long story short, I was kind of ditched the thruster idea, and I moved right into forefins, and Bertelmann started showing up, you know, in the magazines. He got that cover shot at V-Land doing that big air with the forefin. You know, we were catching wind. Ipo was fooling around with forefins. Some other guys in white, and I'm trying to think of, there's some other Californians. I'm trying to think of me. I don't know. Do you know some of the guys in California that are fooling around with forefins? Probably in your area.
Mike Cruteau.
Yeah, Mike Cruteau, huh?
Yeah, he was real ahead of the curve on a lot of different design stuff, and he was a real early forefin guy.
Yeah. And they worked unreal for our East Coast waves, and even today I ride a forefin. I love the flow and the speed that you can get out of the gate on those, and linking up maneuvers, like just everything about them. I really, really like them. But I think it was the first board I made. Kelly was a forefin, and it was pretty funky. It was like a bat tail forefin, pretty progressive, but it was like sizing up the fins. Like the fins on the back were so small, almost like a keychain, you know, TR, little teeny little back quads, and trying to, you know, get that stuff sized up and dialed in for Kelly was a little bit, you know, I wouldn't say that I hit the mark out of the gate with him. So I think it was like the second board. I made him a tri-fin, and he was surfing quite well on that one. And I made him a few other quads he did pretty well on, and Sean. But yeah, so that was kind of how that whole relationship started, TR, through Quiet Flight. And I think Ed Leisure and Richard Bunsen, I think those guys were quite pleased that I brought Kelly on board. That's a whole nother story, like in itself, of just Kelly's career. Before that time, Kelly was riding like a boogie board, like before he got on the Kechele team, he was riding this boogie board. It was called like a tubos. It was really weird. It was almost like those flow hose sandals, real soft, spongy EVA sort of foam, and had these like rails that were just like straight down rails with fins on it, and had the leash on the nose of the board, kind of like a boogie board, obviously, right? It was basically like a boogie board / surfboard. But yeah, so that was kind of like Kelly around 7, 8 years old was turning heads on those boards, and people were kind of like tripping out, like, whoa, look at this kid, he's so cute, look at him go, you know. And Sean as well. was definitely right behind him. And Sean was already on fiberglass boards, being Kelly's older brother. But so, yeah, they transitioned to quiet flight, and my career started taking off from that point on. Sundeck was supporting me. I got out on the world tour.
Beginning of the main event here at the Waimea Pipeline Masters.
By an understanding of each other's tragedy. You had eyes for him, I had eyes for her. We had eyes we couldn't see. But then I caught on in my own little way and tried to make a dream come true. And it's been such a long time, I'm not sure what to do. It just goes, when you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, just goes. When you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, I really don't know if I need your love. I know I need your company. I guess I'm not a pretty sight, but could you stay with me? Well, you can use me if you want to, babe, 'cause you know I wouldn't mind. I guess I've always been that way. I guess I've been behind. It just goes, when you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, just goes. You probably thought I was a well-adjusted boy, but I'm just as lost as everybody else. You might have thought I was a well-adjusted boy, but I'm just as stuffed as everybody else. It just goes, when you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, just goes. When you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, we were drawn together by an understanding of each other's tragedy. You had eyes for him, I had eyes for her. We had eyes we could not see. But then I caught on in my own little way and tried to make a dream come true. And it's been such a long time, I'm not sure what to do. It just goes, when you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, just goes. When you're lonely, I hope. When you're lonely, when you're lonely, I hope.
From that point on, Sundeck was supporting me. I got out on the world tour. I started going to Hawaii every single winter. Totally, pretty much made up my mind at that point to aerials are cool on small waves and I'll do them here and there, but I want to start learning how to really surf proper. I got my small wave surfing down. I want to surf big waves. I want to learn to surf proper on point breaks and all that. So I really started changing everything, and I'm really, really glad that I did, TR, because it was a controversial thing. Aerials were still not accepted at that time. Tom Carroll winning everything and kind of coming in on the backside of Mark Richards and him and Barton, and they were, the young new Aussies that were super consistent and riding bigger boards. I recognize that's really, really cool too, to have strong legs and to like stick a 7-foot board up in the lip vertical, it looks really, really cool, you know. And I could kind of relate to that too from what Greg Lohr was doing. I was thinking like, yeah, I want to get barreled off my nut at Pipeline and figure out this wave and figure out how to ride backdoor and off the wall and sunset. And it was just all this huge nonstop learning curve. And at the same time, you know, tweaking my shapes and learning, you know, it was just all nothing but learning, you know. And aerials weren't really part of that equation for me. But yeah, so many names, you know, that picked up the ball and ran with it. And in fact, you know, when I was competing in Japan, they were starting to recognize, and I believe they were some of the first guys that started doing air shows, and they would have it as a sidebar event, and they would have air shows. Like at Nijima, they had an air show, and at Chiba, they started having air shows, and they were giving away pretty good prize money, and it was pretty cool. And not everybody was entering them. Willie Morris and Frohoff, Ted Robinson, Bud Lamas. Some of those are the names that kind of come to mind that were like, you know, wanting to do airs and events and pushing it. I believe I got third one time. I think it might have been Nijima in one of them. But again, at that time, I just wasn't my main focus. And nor did I want to get hurt, TR. You know, I didn't want to hurt my knee and take myself out, you know. And yeah, aerials are, the consequences of doing airs are your body is really going to take it's going to really take a hit. You're going to, you know, tear tendons. You're going to sprain ankles, you know, and pushing it, you know. But, you know, I greatly admire all the guys that stuck with it. I know you mentioned you got to connect with John Holman. I had heard about Holman kind of shortly after the Stubbies, I want to say. And, you know, hey, there's this other kid in town who's doing airs like you, Keck, da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, cool, you know, and I want to check it out. And then finally I'd seen Holman doing them, and he was doing some really cool stuff. And he was focused on that and that only. Yeah, I was stoked for him, and I was stoked to see that it inspired somebody else to pick up those rings, that baton and run with it as well. And, you know, and Davey Smith, I greatly admire like how he stuck with it and like started doing like all kinds of other sort of skate maneuvers. And, you know, like I was watching some of his old footage. He was doing like a corrupt flip with the closeout El Rolo. Jimmy Medico got me hooked up with Davey, and he took me surfing, and Jimmy documented a couple sessions we had, and we were kind of trying to push our surfing and see where it was going to go. And I did a couple airs, and Davey did some really cool stuff. And it was a really cool kind of thing that we got to share together. And, but I admire that he really, really stuck with it. And I think he deserves a lot of credit as well. And he got a lot of credit. He did. He definitely, of all the Californians, he probably might have gotten more credit than Kevin. I do recognize that Kevin was doing some super cool airs and stuff too. And, you know, there's going back to mentioning like a lot of other names that I really think, you know, stuck with it and they kept pushing it. Johnny Futch was another guy that really pushed his airs at First Peak, getting that slingshot off the wedge, even like Bud Lamas as well. I didn't actually see, you know, personally some of the airs, but I'd heard people talking about it, and that Bud was doing airs, you know, somewhere in those early 80s at Huntington. And I recall like him getting that Surfer magazine cover that was getting vertical. It kind of looked like he was maybe trying to get it, you know, get an air. He was kind of pushing his board up vertical. And there's guy John McClure, you know, Malibu guy. I recall he started taking to the air. And then Potts got that Surfing magazine cover, you know, and yeah, it was a rad, super rad shot, you know. And it was like, wow, it's like aerials are here. But I think if you were to ask him, I bet he would kind of have some similar stories as to what I'm saying about, like, the airs are good for the right time and place, you know?
How about McCrannles?
Yeah, Scott McCrannles too, for sure. He was an incredible vert rider. And yeah, McCrannles used to do some of those air show events as well in Japan at some of those events. And I traveled with Scott on tour quite a bit, and I love that guy. Huge respect to him. And he definitely had that surf skate style. I'm happy that, you know, I was got a little piece of that era, and you know, yeah, I got to witness it all and be a little part of it, you know.
Yeah, a huge part of it. And wow, I mean, your story, it's so multifaceted. Like what we've just gone through is not only the history of air, but the history of pro surfing, the first pro tours, the history of surfboard design, and so much more. The last thing I want to say is
Yeah, buddy.
thank you so much for that day. We were at Salina Cruise, and I'd been working all day, and it was dark. It was past sunset, and you said, T, let me watch your camera, grab my board. You've got to go get one wave.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah, I think so.
I paddle out, and it's dark. I mean, it's already like, and just being able to like paddle out there, I'm just, my hands going through the water. I was just so fucking happy, bro. I can't even tell you. It was just like,
yeah, bro. Yeah.
After seeing all those waves all day.
Yeah.
I hadn't surfed one wave probably in like 2 or 3 days. Because you know my style of work. I have a gnarly work ethic, and I don't even want to surf. I just want to get the best footage and the best angles, and I'll walk 5 miles to get that special angle, and so I paddle out into the dark, and I don't even know that anybody's out there. I think that everybody came in, and I paddle out, and I get to the tip of the point, and this massive set comes in.
Yeah.
I paddle over the first wave, and the next wave, it's this big wall, and I look up behind the point, and I can see that somebody's on the wave. I can barely see, but I can see like the whitewater trail, and they're like behind the point, like took off in the backwash.
Yeah.
And as it gets closer, I can see it's Slater.
Right. Yeah.
And he does this huge bottom turn and goes straight up into the lip and does a carving 360 in the lip behind the rocks.
Yeah.
Like nobody could see it but me. And as I paddle over and it just looks like a Hail Mary, like there's no way in hell that he's going to make it. And as I get to the top of the wave and I look back over my shoulder, I look down, he free falls out of the lip into the barrel.
Oh shit.
And then I see the back of the wave, and you know how it is out there. Salina Cruz, it's just like doubling up, tripling up. And you remember that day, it was cranking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see the back of the wave, and it's just churning and doubling up, and I see it peeling, and I see it peeling, and I see it peeling. And I'm just like going, oh my God, he's going to get drilled into the rocks for sure.
Yeah.
And then I look down the line, and then I see him smash the lip from the back of the wave. He made it.
Yeah.
And that was like probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen on a surfboard. Right. And then the next wave, I took off and freaking rode that wave all the way on your board. First time I ever rode your board, and it just felt like part of my feet.
I do remember. Yeah, that's cool.
And rode the wave to the very, very end, straightened out. Like, I mean, it was like a 9.5.
Hell yeah.
And
So sick.
after
Yeah.
witnessing Slater,
yeah,
and all the Groms, you know, got to
yeah,
see that like, whoa, the cameraman, he actually,
yeah. He knows what he's doing. Hell
and
yeah,
so,
TR.
dude, thank you
That's
so
so
much.
cool, bro. Thank you,
Yeah.
man. Thanks for that trip, man. That trip was forever in my mind. The crew, the kids that we had, those were the best kids. They're all so well mannered. When we pulled up at Salina Cruz and they see Kelly freaking riding, they were just like frothing, just slobbering on the windows, you know? Couldn't believe it. Kelly wasn't maybe so happy that we pulled up with a whole pack of people, but he got over it. He got over it. I reminded him of that like not too long ago. He was like, "Oh yeah, that's right." He kind of forgot. But
And he didn't let the kids know that he was bummed. Remember?
no, not at all. Not at all.
He
Yeah.
was so nice to
No.
the kids,
Oh, he
and
was so nice.
the kids
But
got to like got their fantasy, and then the kids
yeah,
all paddled out, and I was standing next to you, and we were watching the kids, you know, doing the coaching thing, and he was packed up and ready to leave, and then he walked up, and under his breath, he said to you, he goes, "Hey, don't come back here tomorrow."
yeah, I think he did.
Remember that?
I think so. I think I remember him saying something like that. Yeah. I think I pointed at Chad. I was like, "It was him." Yeah. Chad's pointing at me. No, it was Keck's idea. No,
And we
so
didn't go back there the next day either.
Yeah. I think we went to one of the other spots.
Yeah. But that was classic.
Yeah, that was super special, TR. I was glad we got to share that, and I was so thankful that I got to know you and spend time with you. You know, that was really special.
Yeah,
And,
that was amazing.
Yeah.
And then you made me that magic board after that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I remember you talking to me about food and the importance of eating good, and they were like, "Yeah, chicken. You know why they call it foul? You know, it's foul. You know, it sits in you." Yeah, I'm trying to get get on a better track of eating much better.
Good night, bro. Thank you so much for your
you too,
time.
TR. Thanks, bro.
It's going to be an epic
Love
video.
you, buddy. Yes.
Love you
Stay
too,
safe.
man.
Give Ivan a hug for me, man.
I will
and
for
Bobo.
sure. I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stay in touch, bro. Thank you, TR. Take care. All right, bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in. It really is our honor and pleasure to bring you unique content that is inspirational and educational. So make sure and click the subscribe to stay in the loop. The biggest day on record at Puerto Escondido, check this out. Larry Bertelman, the innovator of progressive surfing. How to surf like a little kid when you're 60 years old? Check this video out.